Thank you all for joining us on the live stream. Thank you for joining in. For those in the back, if your legs start to hurt, by all means sit on the floor. And if you find that undignified, we've got some viewing rooms and CAE as well. So whatever works for you. So thank you for joining us. Two Intel legends right here. I won't say how many years combined experience. We don't want to, call out any numbers.
It's not polite to a lady.
Yeah, okay.
I'm so young.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm young.
I didn't even know you were actually out working yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we have a senior, Mercyhurst University here. And so Suki's going to ask some questions of John, but really, I picked this room because the questions need to come from you, okay? So you have two intelligence legends experts here in their field, so please ask questions. So to give you a little bit of who we've got here with us, so Suki earned her intelligence degree in 2005 and has been a competitive intelligence advisor in the automotive, advertising, pharmaceutical, technology, and defense industries, to name a few. She's based in London now, the city where she was born, but has worked globally, most notably in China and the Middle East, as well as in the United States and the United Kingdom. She describes herself as an analytic storyteller, helping customers to understand the data they've gathered so they're able to make more informed decisions about their future. She calls her own business Mira Biru.
Mirror view. That's okay.
A name she coined to describe what she helps her clients do, mitigate risk and build reliance. She is also the head of International Strategic Projects, heading the United Kingdom office of DC Analytics, owned by Mercyhurst Intel grad Diane Chido, and chief storyteller for the Group of Humans, a collective design agency. Since 2015, Suki has become an even better known for her work mentoring entrepreneurs, including many women in the fast-growing tech industry. Among many other honors, she's a global judge and mentor at the Accelerator Mass Challenge and was named one of the 30 change makers for London Tech Week. She is an intrinsic part of the tech community as a board advisor for Tech London Advocates, Global Tech Advocates. She also joined her friend, venture capitalist Chris Topman, to launch the 50/50 Pledge, an initiative designed to give more women access to venture capital. They're working to improve gender equality in venture capital, noting that only 7% of investing partners at venture capital firms are female, and only 2% of venture capital dollars are invested in startups with female founders. As a direct result of this initiative, the Included VC Fellowship was born, with Notion Capital leading 8 other VC funds to train members of the underrepresented communities for careers in venture. The accolades continue to come her way. Computer Weekly has named her one of the most influential women in UK tech top 50 since 2018, with 2021 in the top 5. And the Financial Times named her to its list the UK's top 100 Black and minority ethnic leaders in technology. A noted public speaker and trainer, Suki keynotes events around the world in both competitive intelligence and venture capital, including presentations at conferences in the United Arab Emirates, China, India, Austria, and Germany.
We can start
I'm
now.
in the last look. I'm
You can start now.
Shoot, there's another volume yet, Suki.
Contributing source to BBC Panorama, BBC World News Service as an intelligence and tech advisor. And in 2019, Suki was inducted into the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows. Woo!
Yeah. We should be interviewing you.
John has this huge career, and he's got this
And this is what he
and he
gave
gives this really small bio, and it's just wrong.
Which is why we're going to have to ask John a lot of questions here. So John is retired from the competitive intelligence after being involved in almost 40 years as managing partner of the Helicon Group. John receives degrees in economics from Yale College and the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, and law degrees from the University of Michigan and the George Washington University's National Law Center. As a partner at Helicon and his wife, Carolyn M. Vela, John and Carolyn authored or co-authored 10 books on CI. He has made training presentations on CI in 11 countries on 5 continents. John taught courses, has been a guest lecturer at 3 U.S. universities and 1 Canadian university. He has written over 300 articles, columns, book reviews, blogs on CIs and other related topics. With Carolyn, John has been heavily involved with breeding and showing pedigree cats as well. The two of them wrote 6 books on the subject, including Breeding Pedigree Cats, 2 editions. John and Carolyn judge pedigree cats in the US, Canada, and Russia. John received the Meritorious Award for the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professional, SCIP, which has been given to Carolyn several years before. So that is who we have here today. So thank you both for having this conversation. And
I'll take
please,
your resume.
Let's welcome them and start to think of some questions.
We're going to swap resumes.
Okay.
I'm going to take yours.
Thank you. First and foremost, mine is really long. That's the long format of the bio, so just completely ignore that. The short format of the bio is just, I went to Mercyhurst. I've had a decent career. I got to travel, and I have in my career got to be friends and colleagues and peers with people like John. This guy is one of those founding members of our industry that wrote the textbooks that I got to use. Not to make you sound old, but we're looking at somebody here who is one of the founding fathers of our industry. He helped grow the competitive intelligence world. Him and Caroline, his dearly departed woman, who's really was like the boss of the company, no lie, he will even tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were one of the first people that I was lucky enough to meet when I went to a SCIP conference as a student. And they were just the best. They gave you advice. They helped you formulate what you wanted to do. It was like an encyclopedia, and it is even now, encyclopedia of knowledge of just what we needed to know in the industry. One of the most important things for me was in 1999, they wrote a book about the internet age of competitive intelligence in 1999. I started the program in 2001. To meet somebody who wrote that book and to know that they were ahead of the curve, I was hands down, I was like, I'm on Team John and Carolyn. And this is who you have today. Do not waste the opportunity to ask questions. Do not waste the opportunity to connect with him. He's donated books to this institution that aren't published anymore, that you won't be able to get.
I think most of them are out of print.
Yeah. So people, the first thing I want to say is, hey, John.
How you doing, babe?
And secondly, I want you to tell people why you got into competitive, how that happened.
Okay.
And I'm going to cut him off when he gets too long, because I can talk.
What are you,
he can
channeling
talk.
Carolyn?
The two of us together is bad.
That's bad news. Bad news. I had been general counsel at an insurance company, and I got fired for trying to turn them into the insurance department for refusing to pay valid claims. So I had to do something at home, and I started doing research for law firms. Since I was the only person, I was in Bucks County, that was trained on the only 2 databases in existence. Most law firms couldn't afford them. So I did their research. And I soon became the person to go to, not for research, but for expert witnesses. How do we take apart an expert witness? And one day, Carolyn saw an article in a business magazine by a guy named Ian Gordon in Canada. And he was talking about what he was doing with the same basis, and also at Dow Jones. And he was working with companies to help them get intelligence on the people they did business against. And Carolyn said, okay, that's what we should be doing. I said, okay. I said, how do we start to do it? She said, well, we have to credential. I said, how do we credential? She said, let's write a book. To her, that was a perfectly normal way to start things. I had already written 2 books, but they were kind of legal books.
Yeah.
And I got paid for them, but I don't know if anybody read them. But so that's the first book we did. And then the publisher liked it, and we did, I think, 9 books for the same publisher. And we did 1 book for a publisher that we had ended up doing a column for. And she was the only one that pushed it. So if you write a book, make sure you got a publisher that pushes. This publisher got a review in the Wall Street Journal, got it mentioned in an article in the New York Times, and ended up putting editions, I think, in German and Japanese. So, which we didn't find out about for 10 years later. Publishers don't keep in touch with you very much. You know, you give them the book and that's it. They don't want to hear from you again. They even resent sending the checks out. So that's how we got started. And every time we came up with something new or different in competitive intelligence, we would sit down and say, do you want to write another book? Finally, Carolyn got to the point saying, I'm tired of writing these books. I said, okay. I said, what do you want to do? She said, I want to write a book about cats. She said, if you get me a book about showing cats, well, we can go do this, but you put your name on top. I said, fine. So I did some competitive research and I identified one publisher. Publisher had books on pedigree dogs and showing pedigree dogs, and pedigree cats, but not showing pedigree cats. So I sent them a proposal. The next day we had a fax back saying, you know, we're sending you a contract, but it won't get there for a week. Don't take this to anybody else. And we showed it to Carolyn. She went, you dirty, what did you do? I said, you said you'd do it if I got you the cat book. She said, you expect me to write this thing now? I said, yeah. She said, okay. So she wrote that, and I wrote the business book, and then we'd swap the finished products and go from there.
That's the perfect example of identifying white space, by the way. Dog pedigree, none on cats. Identify white space and go in there. Perfect example for competitive intelligence professionals.
Yeah.
But they work together really well. And I can say one thing is, if you find someone that you can work well with together, by all means, that can be a lifelong partnership. I believe we have Dr. Fleischer here, Dr. Craig Fleischer,
right.
And he works with Babette Ben-Yusen, who is in Australia. They have written, I'm sure, there's a nodding of people like, we know those books too, and that's really great. You have those lifelong partnerships when you're working in CI.
And we've got, I think, all of their books are in the collection that we gave you, and I think there's at least one of them that's signed.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
if you can't, you still got, Craig is here, you can get him to sign it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what's really great is John has these stories. Oh, you know what? Somebody ask a question about the stories, because I'll be like, well, tell us, what was the most interesting project you ever worked on? That's a hard one. But what one really sticks out in your mind that can help the students understand the intricacies of CI?
Okay, we got a contact from an individual that was actually a contractor with a large tech company. Which, by the way, be always careful in that situation. Make sure everything is signed by the parent company too, otherwise you're likely not to get paid. We did get paid, but we'd been burned before. And their concern was this. There was an article in a paper in California, I guess, talking about how another tech company had sued a small tech company and been sued back. And one of the allegations was that the big tech company had basically pirated some employees in a particular area. I don't want to mention the area, but a particular cutting edge area in tech, consumer tech. And they took a look at that as a warning, and they said, why would big company have tried to hijack a couple of these employees in this little bitty space? And they said, can you find out, whether or not these people are working there? And the usual thing is anything else you can find that might be interesting, which is, as long as there's a check behind it, that's a great assignment. But so we started digging, and I saw it was a lawsuit. So first thing I did is I got the filing of the lawsuit, and I got the docket sheet. And the docket sheet told me that weren't just 3 people, there were 9 people being sued, involved in the case. And I started reading through the papers, and I found out, well, there's a case in Canada involving these people. So this thing's getting really interesting. So we got the papers from the Canadian courts. That took a little while longer. So I went through the filings, went through the pleadings, and I asked for the papers on service of process, because I wanted to see where all these people were. And some were in Canada and some were in the United States. So I now had a list of 16 or 18 people that had worked either for this company, the tiny company, or for some of its partners in this space. So we had that down. So we knew they weren't working for that company anymore, because why would they be sued? And the reason the paper in California hadn't picked it up is because the company in Canada didn't send them a press release. So they have no way of knowing, and nobody checked. They just printed the press release like most business papers do. When you read it in a business paper, it's generally written by the target. So give it that kind of credibility. So we started running down these people. And Carolyn said, you know, that's something funny about him. I said, what's funny about him? He said, they're all about the same age. I said, okay, I'll check into that. So we started checking. We found out that probably 2/3 of them had graduated from the same program in a particular university in either engineering, computer science, and related fields. Okay, that's interesting. So we started running the names. We found out another group of those had worked on published articles in the field. 2 or 3 of these people. So we have this very tight-knit group of people, all of whom could be traced back. It'd be like tracing back these people in the front row to Mercyhurst in 10 years and say, what do they have in common? Well, you know, they were all at the same college over a period, not all at the same time, but they all were in that college. And some were graduate, some were undergraduate. So we started digging through that. So then we just ran a bibliographic check and found more articles by them. So the last thing, the problem was, are they working for the big company? Okay? Now, how would you figure that out? Anybody? Oh, come on, people.
Come on.
You call the company. You ask them to switch to Ms. Fuller's extension. I'm sorry, we don't have that in the directory. Okay, so she doesn't work there. Mr. Allen's, I'm sorry, he's away on vacation. But want to leave a message? Sure, transfer me in and then hang up. Never leave a message. And so got to the point and found out that 6 or 7 of them worked in the same company. So we're starting to see a thing here. What they're working on is a particular thing it's close to AI. And so the last thing we did is Carolyn suggested Facebook. I said, what am I looking for Facebook for? She said, because they employ human beings, fool. I said, okay. So we went to look in Facebook, and there it was a marvelous thing. This young man he's getting married. And he and his bride, they've already said they're getting married on the 15th of the month. And they're going to take their honeymoon to like Hilo, Hawaii. I mean, what a wonderful place to go. I mean, on your honeymoon, how wonderful. And when he comes back, he's got this exciting new job in this new unit that they're starting at big tech company. Oh, isn't that nice? So the last thing we had to figure out was, well, let's figure out, we know who's in the unit, we know what it does, who's running it. And we looked at the biographies of these, I guess it was down to 9 people. And there was one that was older than the others, and on all the articles, he was always the lead on these articles. So what we did is we checked, and he was not, they wouldn't say he was there, and they wouldn't say he wasn't there. So we did some digging around, and we talked to the editor of publications where he had published. And they were happy to talk about Ben. And he said Ben got a job opportunity, then was told he couldn't start for a year because of legal problems, so he basically told him to go to hell. I said, oh, God bless him. So we now had this. So we have the unit being formed. We know who's in it. We know who's going to run it. We know he's left frustrated. Why does he leave? Because it's going to be a year at least before the unit can start. What does that mean? Now we look back in Canada. The case has been settled. Canadian company, U.S. subsidiary gave up fighting, but the deal was they couldn't use any of these people in this particular part of the industry for a period of months. It was probably 18 months. Now, it wouldn't stop Ben coming back to the company to reorganize them. So we gave our client, based on a news clipping in a local newspaper, the information that one of their big competitors was doing heavy-duty headhunting in a particular area of importance to them, but had been stymied. That the stymieing was only good for 12 to 18 months. And after that, they would have a full unit up and running, completely staffed, and completely funded. And we got all of that out of an article about that long in the newspaper. And the basic things. I'd love you to look on the face. What do you do? How do we find out if they're working there? Call. You know. What's going to happen? They're not going to tell you that they work there? If they're not, that's a more secret than I want to get involved in.
Exactly.
Then you worry about that kind of secret stuff. So that was one of the ones. I think that was probably the most fun one, because it was like peeling back. It's like opening a page in the book and finding there's a whole other chapter here.
Yeah.
Instead of being the last page of the book, then you find out there's another volume. And it was really quite a lot of fun. Not a lot of time, but a lot of impact for the client.
Yeah. And that's just the power of research.
Yeah.
Just that little clip.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of insatiable curiosity, because a lot of times people would have just stopped and said, oh, I don't know. They might have done 1 or 2 of those steps, but they wouldn't have been willing to go down the rabbit hole. which is sometimes a good rabbit hole and sometimes
Sometimes
not.
those, and sometimes they're bad. Oh,
But,
you don't
you
want to get
know.
in there. But sometimes people will say the strangest things.
Yeah.
We worked on a project once involving, it was a food product that was being launched by one of the Midwestern food companies. And it was obviously on a trial because it was in a couple of markets, and our client wanted to know more about it. So we're looking at it and saying, it fits all the profiles that they're ready for production, but our research indicates they're not making it yet. They've got another company making it, which is typical of when you're testing a product. You're not going to shut down a plant that produces Campbell's soup to try to produce something like homemade enchiladas, and see if it works. You'd starve to death. You get somebody else to make it for you. And so the final thing we got to was couldn't figure if they're going to go forward with it. So what we did is what we usually did. If when in doubt, call somebody. So we called the company and asked for the product manager for the product. And I got the product manager on the phone. And I said I was calling about this. It was written up in Food Network magazine or something, and wanted to know if they were taking bids for continuation of trial packages. And the guy on the phone, he said, look, I'm in a hurry. I said, okay. He said, all right, is that the only question? I said, yes. He said, no, we're not letting any more contracts. We're making it ourselves. We're starting on Monday. Yeah, anything else? No, thanks very much. I appreciate it. Have a nice day. Go to your meeting. People don't think if they're in a hurry.
And also, there is the value. I know right now a lot of us do research and we are, keyboard warriors where you think you can find everything online. I cannot stress to you the value of just picking up the phone. It's like, yeah, you use that online accessibility to get the phone number, but pick up the phone, especially because a lot of people don't expect to be called. So when they are called, sometimes people will just talk too much.
And
sometimes you just want them to shut up.
Or you can one-step them.
Yep.
You go, I want to talk to you. You're the director of marketing for the product I want. I don't know that she's going to talk to me. So I go to you. You're around the table. You're 1 or 2 levels above her. And you've probably got somebody who's watching your telephone. You're high enough to be blocked. So I call you. And what happens? They say, well, you want to speak to Miss So-and-so. And I ask, can you transfer me? And they say, yes. And I transfer her over. Now, when she sees the phone on her desk, what does she see? Anybody?
She's got an internal
It's
call.
an internal call. It's not an external call. So it's safe to pick up. It's not somebody trying to bug her. And the internal call says, hi, my name's John McGonagle. I just spoke to Mr. Smith's staff, and he said you could help me with something. And what are you going to do? Sit up for a second, and yeah, okay, that's the boss. Got to make sure, hope it isn't too much. And you ask a couple of not important things, slip in what's important, ease away from it, take a diversion so you don't know what's going on, which I'll explain in a second. And then I'm done. If I do a good enough diversion after the hit, you're never going to remember that you answered that question. In the diversion, we always used, she mentioned cats. In our office, being at home, we had cats running around. Pedigree cats, beautiful little things that would walk across your telephone when you're on the telephone and step on the keys. And one day I was on the headset talking to somebody, and one of the cats came up and started playing on the keys, which is really cute, but doesn't do much for your conversation. And so the individual who was, I was getting ready to cut off anyway, and said, what's that? I said, cats. He said, what? I said, Felix domesticus, 4 paws per. He said, you have cats in the office? I said, yeah, it's in our home. It's one of the benefits, except this one's walking on the phone. He said, that's silly. He said, I've never heard anybody had a cat in their office. I said, it's really nice because usually they're just asleep. So we talked about cats for 2 minutes. And I said goodbye. I will bet you the man never remembered what we talked about because all he thought was, this crazy guy with a cat in his office is talking to me, wasting my time. So he's basically scrubbing it out of his brain because there's no point wasting the space in his brain for essentially nonsense. That's called deconnecting or decoupling. You want them to be looking over here after you're finished here. You just give enough time so you go up to the target, get the target, and then drift away. Now, sometimes you can just do startling people. One time, we were checking on a factory, and we had pretty well settled that the factory was, in fact, open. Our client thought the factory was still closed, internal disputes. So I had talked to some investment analysts, and the company was doing well. So I called the plant manager, and I said, I wanted to talk to you about the plant. He said, I said, well, I talked to so-and-so, at Morgan, and they do their profile, and they gave me your name, which is true. And he said, well, what are you talking about? I said, I just want to see, how you're going. I gather you're struggling a lot, not even on one shift yet. Any idea when you're going to go to a full shift? And he went, what? You stupid son of a... We're on 3 shifts as of today. Who the heck told you that we only have 1 shift and it's not working? She said, I'm sorry, I guess the guy at Morgan didn't know. He said, well, David, get out of my face. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll send you a Christmas card.
And that's one of those things. Also, I want to come back to gatekeepers, because if there's anything in the world as a intelligence professional, it doesn't matter what sector you're in, gatekeepers, they are your best source and they're your best friends. That is how you will get access to anybody, is if you are friends with the doorman, friends with the person that works in the cafe in the building, friends with the secretary, receptionist. Those are the people you should always be the nicest to. Well, comparably, but you obviously are going to treat everybody with respect. But when you get those gatekeepers, really, those are the ones that you should be developing, because even if they leave that company, they're generally going to go to a similar company. And they are your best source for information. It's sort of the unofficial insiders experts. And they know the comings and goings of people. They know who the supplier is that's coming in there that you can't figure out. But they know XYZ was there last week.
Oh, yeah.
They are some of the best sources for you ever. So always remember that. Even now, as students, you should always remember that. Be very nice to the person that is in the careers office that is the receptionist, because that is pretty much how I found about my internship, because I went in and they said, oh yeah, there's another internship. And I was like, really? Yeah, I got that information before the other students.
And they're gatekeepers that are outside the firm. We worked with a company that was in the fast food business, was trying to find out some information about Wendy's. And the thing they found out, which they didn't know, is that essentially Wendy's was able to make money because they owned the baked goods company that sold all the baked goods to all of its franchisees. And therefore their pricing structure could be different because they were making money on the rolls instead of paying out to whatever bakeries it was. But the people that knew the most about things were the suppliers. So we could talk to our client supplier of plastic spoons and find out how business is going with Wendy's, because they don't want to lose the client. And say, the client said, we could talk to you. We tell them, you never talk to people like this without the client's approval, because you don't want to screw up their relationships. But these people know things. Why do they know things? Because they're trying to get the business from Wendy's. If they don't have the business from Wendy's, they can probably tell you down to the dollar how much somebody else is getting a year from Wendy's for what products, because they're competing on tenths of a cent per product. So they've got to know this stuff. So instead of scrambling around trying to find out how much Wendy's spends a year on plastic forks, you just contact Burger King's supplier, if Burger King is your client, and get their permission and talk to the supplier. Explain what you're doing. Tell them, please feel free to check back at my contact at Burger King, that it's okay to talk to me because we want to know what's going on. And these people know not only that stuff, they know stuff that hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
Because they're keeping track of their customers, but they're keeping track of the people they want to be their customers. And they're going to be ahead of almost everybody else in there. So it's relationships, but it's also, you've got to develop a telephonic approach. Like I told you the story about the cats. That's a silly thing. But if you can, it took the mind off. If you want to learn about elicitation interviews, in the library now is a book by a guy named John Nolan. And I can see heads back there. John was an expert in this area. He'd been in the military beforehand. And then when 9/11 called, he ended up going back in and coming out of CI. But he wrote an excellent book that has a good section in there about elicitation. And I was at a meeting with him once, and he put on a demonstration that was taped where he sat down next to a person on a make-believe park bench and got out from him information on the contract. The man was told not to disclose any information about the contract that he would be interviewed about, By the time John was done, I think John had everything but a copy of the contract. And it was watching, it was watching the approach. It was watching, I'm on your side, not I'm over here. It's like that's why you get the handoff from upstream. I'm on your side of the fence. It's an inside call. Already that's safer than talking to somebody like me. Now, what we did is we put on a presentation by accident. Somebody asked both of us. One person asked his John, one person asked this John, and we both came out on stage at the same time, ready to go. So we said, hey, we'll split it. So John did his half and I did my half, because mine was how to protect yourself against people like John Nolan and what to look for, what were the tells. It's like playing cards.
That, by the way, is one of his books.
What?
How to protect yourself.
Yes, protecting yourself against competitive intelligence.
Yep.
And we were just giving, how do you pick up on things? And so afterwards somebody said, geez, you guys work well together, and how long have you worked together? And John is if you think I'm talkative, John is, for a man who says nothing. I never said anything important. And he said, oh, we've worked together 42 minutes. And he said, but you both fit in? He said, we're both doing the same thing. I'm trying to get the information. He's trying to stop me. We're walking down the same street. We're just coming at it from opposite directions. And think about that. Everything, if you have to worry about somebody coming after your firm, everything that you do, think about whether or not your competition is either doing it or is capable of doing it, and whether it will pay off. And that you've got the key to all of protecting yourself against competitive intelligence. You just put yourself in another place. And when you're doing things like solicitation interviews, you have to be in another place. You don't necessarily have to be another person, but you have to be quiet. You have to be polite. You have to be understanding. You have to be devious. You have to be wrong. Shrewd. Yeah. Sometimes you want people to correct you. And you just say something that's just a little wrong, and this is something they're proud of. Oh, no, we got it finished in 90 days. Oh, terrific. Did you get some recognition on that? You keep going. I got the 90 days. Keep going. Don't let them think about the 90 days. Think about the fact, did you get some recognition? Well, I think I'm getting approached. Terrific. Congratulations on that. That's really important. What will you be doing? I don't care what he's going to do. But I do. It's in my directory. Because if he gets a promotion and I'm back at them as a target, I now have my old friend George. Hi, George. Sean. Yeah. I spoke to you months ago about this thing. Oh, yeah. How are you doing in the new job? Terrific, yeah. I need to talk to somebody in your shop about this. Who would I talk to? And we do the same thing. Transfers me over to somebody, and George suggested that you might help me, and we're down the same trail. But it's got to be thinking always like not you, not your client, but like the target. You've got to put your head inside of the target, and you've got to be the target. And by the way, rehearsing it does not hurt. Actually working with somebody else, practicing an elicitation interview. Yeah. You can do that kind of thing.
Questions? Come on, people. I know he can talk for no, Eric.
Eric was going to ask, when am I shutting up?
He's one of our CI. No, hey, do we have a question from another room, Lindy?
From me, I've put the call out for the other questions, but John, what you said about Wendy's was so fascinating to me, because I think it's so easy to say the first thing you do is get that question and you go right to the computer. But instead, you're talking about what's in your full toolkit to be able to find the answers. Could you talk a little bit about what's your process when you get a question like that about Wendy's or Burger King? How do you even start to think about, I'm going to go after this food supplier?
First thing we do is we talk to the client. And we ask them I don't say it this way, we ask them what they think they know about the client, about the target and the client. I wouldn't say what you think. I say, what do you know about them? And I just treat it as if it may be right, it may be wrong, but it's a start. And then what we do is we would split it up. I would do any legal research. I'd look for litigation, SEC filings that were withdrawn, but some you can still find. And Carolyn would go up thinking about it for a while and would come up with something, a letter out of an article out of a Canadian business magazine or something. And I never asked her how she got them, but she got them. And so then we stop and say, okay, now, what do we now know officially about the target? And that's what we started looking at. We looked at the target, and you looked and said, well, it lists all the subsidiaries and everything in the back. And there's some subsidiaries that sort of had generic names and trying to figure what those were. That could be indication of new businesses.
Yep.
Could be an indication of spinning off a division. It could be just leftovers from a product they closed down and they kept the corporate shell. So what we did is start with those. So we ran the names, and that's what we found out. One of them was a bakery. And we're going like, that's interesting. So now we had a target. Wendy's owns a bakery. Are they selling baked goods to somebody else? Possible. Or are they selling it to themselves? Or are they doing both? But you want to get the lay of the land. First, start with the client. First is you've got to get them to buy into what you're doing. And second is you want to make sure you pick up anything that they have that is not correct. Because when you present to them, as you know, getting rid of, a really true matter that ain't so is tough. Well, no, that's not right. We know that's not right. So you better come in prepared not only to argue the case, but to make the case. You come in and establish fact. This is what they're doing. According to the local ads, they're hiring this many new bakers. This we have from the Ohio, Board of Corporations. This is what they filed as that, and they filed their line of business, baked goods, and so you want to hit it. Anybody that had a question about it, all you have to do is tell them, this is what we found. Somebody who believes in his heart or her heart of hearts that can't be true, because otherwise, what the problem is? Otherwise, I would know it. So you got to be really diplomatic, right?
Yep.
You can't tell them you're wrong.
No.
We have to guide them to be right. Say, well, that's probably older information. I mean, it's a lie. We don't know exactly when Wendy got in the bakery part, but they're completely integrated. They got in the bakery part probably when you got out of graduate school, but because they don't pay attention. It's what they learned when they got the job and everything. They don't follow up. They may have known everything in the world to know about Wendy's when they first got into marketing, and now that they're the head of marketing, everything they know about Wendy's is now 15 years old, plus whatever they picked up, on the way, which is like putting ornaments on a Christmas tree. The Christmas tree is still 15 years old. You just got new ornaments on it. Okay?
That's another area, the language of diplomacy, because you sometimes just want to tell people, no, you're wrong, because they're wrong. But you have to be learning that communication.
It is not easy to tell your client they're wrong.
Yes, it is not.
No. We had one recently. We were doing some work, and they were they were representing an out of the U.S. company in products in the dairy market, secondary products, which I barely understood, but I understood enough to find out. And their whole premise was that there was a definite market in the U.S. for this particular product, and that they were going to crack that market, and they wanted to know, essentially, was anybody else in that market, and what were they paying? And then we gave them the answers to that, and they definitely didn't like it, because they expected to see that their competitors were charging a very high price for this stuff because it's expensive to make. And we found the one person in the country that even cared about this product. I mean, literally, the only person. We talked to people at other companies and said, who's an outside expert on this? And called this one guy. I don't know why he wanted to be an expert in this, but he was. And we told him, and he confirmed what we said, which is the stuff is expensive to make. There's not much of a market. And the companies that are selling it are trying to cover their costs. They're not trying to dump it. So they're making a little bit of money on each transaction, but on the whole, they're losing money. And one of them is probably prepared to cut the price. So you're talking about going into a market that is not growing but shrinking, and a market which is about ready to face cutthroat price competition. He did not like the answer, to the extent that he didn't pay the bill. Life happens.
Yes,
right?
Indeed it does.
But what do you do with that? What would you do with that? Yeah. I said basically the guy stiffed us. He said he didn't like the answer, it couldn't be right, and I'm not paying your GD bill. Okay.
I would appreciate that, that's for sure. I don't know. Probably wouldn't talk to him again.
That's about all you can do. Anything else is just feeding your ego. Picking up the phone and yelling at him, or saying, you're an idiot, or anything. You're just feeding your own ego. You don't need that. If you do a good job in what you're doing, you get enough feeding your ego. You get enough war stories like I have and what Suki has to be able to feed an ego for a couple of decades.
Sometimes
but
you just gotta walk away.
you got to walk away. And it's not nice to walk away because it's my business and Carolyn's business, or it's Suki's business, or it's her project, and it's our money we're not getting.
And I want to bring that back to John's point about make sure you get that contract from the real supplier, the real stakeholder in your project. Running my company, I lost out on a nice 6-figure amount because, unbeknownst to me, the key stakeholder of what the project I was working on was a very large company, and they had lots of subsidiaries, which were known and unknown, but those subsidiaries were also hiring out other consulting companies. So it feels like it's a grand Ponzi scheme after a while, but you're enough degrees and separations away from the key stakeholder at the top that you may be working on a project for another company. Unbeknownst to you, you're actually doing research, and that research is ending up somewhere up a food chain. That food chain supplier goes out of business, and all those smaller businesses get affected, which is what happened to me in 2018 with a company called Carillion. It was not very nice.
Yeah.
I lost a very, very large portion of my company income because I had projects with 3 different companies, but unbeknownst to me, those 3 companies, the ultimate stakeholder was this one company. So that's why I always tell people, do the due diligence.
Yeah.
Even if you think, I know this company, do the due diligence. You know, people are doing due diligence on you, your organization,
That's right.
your company, whoever, in order to work on their projects. But don't just be accepting of anybody who comes to you and wants you to work on something. You also have to do that in return.
And you make sure you get agreements on that. If they say
Exactly.
that they're hiring you to do work for them for a project for Microsoft. Microsoft's into everything. Or better yet, Facebook.
Meta. It's meta.
It's Meta. Well, see, I retired. When I retired, they were Facebook. So I shut the brain down then. I didn't use Facebook then either, but say Meta, okay? If this depends on anything going to them, you've got to get something signed off. At least in your contract, you have to have something that says this work is being done for you and will be shared with this person at Meta, because if they're going to somebody else, you tell them no. You tell them, I have to know who it's going to, and it's going in the contract. If they can't tell you that, then they're doing it on spec, and they're trying to weasel in on something, okay? On spec is a nice way of getting screwed, okay? That means they're doing, and they think that if they do a good enough job, they'll be able to get the money from the client. Trust me, you don't pay many bills that way.
No.
But you'll learn. Make sure you have a good. If you're working for a firm, make sure you've got a good contract. Play the game ethically. There are times you're going to be tempted to do stuff. There are times you're going to run into things you don't know what to deal with. We did a project involving hummus years ago, and our client, I think, was a minority owner in a company that made hummus. And this company had come in from Israel.
See, people, the amount of things that you can work is hummus. It's like, yeah, hummus.
Yeah, I became the hummus expert to my family. My father-in-law would not go buy any hummus without me approving the brand. I didn't eat the stuff. I didn't nut in the project. So we got this thing and said, finally tell them, okay, what you're doing is they're packaging this in an old plant in Long Island, which we found for them by cross-checking a number of different things, telephone numbers, where people worked, where they lived, things like that, directories, product directories, what plants could make hummus. And it's an old, run-down plant. But they bought property in Virginia, I think it was. And so it looks like they're going to build a plant there. He said, can you check it out? I said, well, it's not in the contract, but I said, well, we'll give it one shot. Otherwise, we're gone. So what we did is, instead of having me drive down there, or Carolyn drive down there, I knew a private detective down there we'd use on commercial projects. And I said, I've got this address. I want you to go out and simply see, is anybody doing anything to this property? You know, does it look like they're beginning construction of something? That's all. Yes or no? And he comes back and he says, can't help you, Mac. I said, why? He says, they've got a lot of guys in there that are carrying guns. He said, I don't do guns. He said, I do white collar stuff. I said, what kind of guns? He said, it looks like the kind Israeli Mossad carries. Oh, I said, all right. So you don't want to go check it out again? He said, hell no, man. He said, these guys were serious. They were outside the property, barring people from even getting parking in front of the property. And I said, well, I guess they're serious about building a plant. And he was scared to death. I don't blame him. I mean, I wouldn't expect to run some guy with a machine gun when I'm looking into hummus. I mean, yeah, something valuable, Coca-Cola maybe, but hummus? Yeah, my wife's cousin makes hummus. It's not like splitting the atom,
Exactly.
But this one, these guys were dead serious. They did not want anybody near the plant. As it turned out, because the plant they were building was quite big and quite expensive. They intended to basically blow a hole in the U.S. market and probably sell more in the first year than the total U.S. market was now. That their sales, it was an assault on the market. They would just be flooding every place with their brand of hummus at a discount price for like a year or two, and just until everyone got established, then they gradually get the price up there. So, but there are times you have to say, I'm not going there. And if you ever feel like that, stop. Don't get tricked into saying, well, it's probably okay. Probably okay doesn't keep you out of jail. We have a situation of a company, I won't mention the name, it was in consumer goods, okay? They hired a competitor, it's in one of my books, but you can look it up if you want. They hired a fellow that I know to do some work. He in turn hired 3 subcontractors. They in turn hired subcontractors.
I'm saying.
Yes, like you said. Already this is not good. Okay. One of the subs apparently started doing dumpster diving. You know what dumpster diving is? It's going through the trash. Depends where it is to do that legally. If it's out in the street, it's legal. If it's on the property, you're now trespassing and committing theft. But it's such a wonderful idea of dumpster diving, and just, can't wait to try it someday. So these guys were doing this for looking for new formulations for something. I don't know. Target Company found out about it. Target Company called the CEO of this products company to task to a meeting. When they left the meeting, the following things eventually came out. The head of competitive intelligence retired. 4 people on the staff were fired. Every competitive intelligence firm that was on the approved list was removed from the approved list, period, and put on a disapproved list. They paid, I think it was $20 or $25 million to the target company and agreed to stay out of that market segment for 3 years. This is because somebody lost control. If you're hiring somebody, make sure that you have control, okay? Because otherwise, you're the one that's going to be tossed out the door. Because you're the one that hired the company that went rogue or subbed it out. If you can, don't let people sub it out. Let them come in a joint venture. I've done that with some of my competitors. Kirk Tyson, for example, he and I jointly, we compete like crazy against each other all the time when I was working. But, we worked on one together. But the contract it was a joint contract with the 2 firms. He was the lead firm. But that company got names of both contractors on the document. And we put in that there would be no subcontracting, because this was right after this happened. And we still have it in our things, that it's no subcontracting without prior notice and acceptance by the client. You should think about that on either side of the transaction. You say, well, I can always bring in Jimmy to help me, if it gets too big. Make sure you clear that with your client, okay? They may have hired you because they only wanted one person, or you only in the project. You've always got to think where the contractor is and what their needs are, and frankly, what scares the hell out of them.
Yep. Right. Lindy has a question from somebody.
John, time for one more question? Sound good?
I don't know. I show it's still It's not evening time yet. No, go ahead.
So, question from the viewing room. They said, what are useful questions you can use that are general enough to get people to start to talk to you at trade shows, industry conferences?
You want to take that one, Suki?
Trade shows. That is my favorite place to be. Primary intel at trade shows. The first thing, if you are going to a trade show, especially if it's a specialist, pharmacies, pharmaceutical events are great because everybody's got a poster. And that poster has the therapeutic area or the product that they're working on. It's usually got their name. It's got the lead person's name.
I'm taking the pictures of it for you.
It's got the affiliated organization's name. And just that alone is gold dust. You take a picture of that. Sometimes you take a picture of a poster and the person standing next to the poster, they want to talk about their work. You go to a trade show, people want to talk about their product. And generally you go to a trade show, you've got your name badge on. You're not hiding who you are. You know, they want to talk about, you don't even have to actually say anything sometimes. You just walk up and they say, oh, do you want to hear about our products? You want to hear all about, blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, they're 20 minutes into telling you everything you don't want to know. Yeah. You've got more information than you needed. Yeah. I love, that was the hardest thing about lockdown for me. Was
no trade shows.
It was not even going to see people I know. It was no conferences.
Putting it from the defensive end, I worked with a company. We developed a presentation that they would distribute to all the different people to go to different trade shows, and we based it on we had a floor plan of where they were at the next trade show. And the first thing I did is pointed out that you have no idea who's in the tent behind you on each side. Find out. And what happened is one of their key competitors was literally back to back with them. Well, most of these guys that have a big tent have a back room. This is where they get the real customers in there and they try to pitch them this or get a purchase order on that or something else. Well, if through the canvas wall here is your competitor, I don't think you want to do that business in that room. The other thing is we showed them lines of sight. Basically, there was an area where you could sit down and have coffee or something like that, take a break. But if you sat right here, I could look straight down here into that room. There was no door on it. It was just an open room. And I could see every person going in there. And she mentioned take a badge. Now, if they had a green badge, I didn't care. That was suppliers. If they had a purple badge, that was probably a potential customer. So I would make sure I got a picture of that badge, or at least went up and saw the badge. But all I had to do was sit here with my bottle of water and just look straight down here and take a look. And no, nobody there, that's fine. Do that for 2 days and I know pretty much who they're trying to reel in. Anybody's been there 3 times is a new customer. So you have to defend against these things. You can't tell the people you don't want your competitors behind you. Usually they're smart enough to know that. But sometimes, in the pharmaceutical ones, everybody's crowded. Everyone wants to be near this aisle or that door or on this floor. So you'll see, honest to God, you'll see your client right next to the competitor online, right?
I'd say the best thing about when you actually have to go out to trade shows and conferences is the fact that for those shows, it is about selling. So those people, those companies that are there, they're trying to sell a product to somebody. And if you're there, people will talk to you. And it's just a matter of making sure that you're able to elicit whatever information you want. But the easiest thing in the world is just walking over. You walk over and you smile at somebody standing at a booth for 8 hours or 12 hours in a day. Mm-hmm. Especially, the best time to go is towards the end of the day. Yeah. Towards the end of the day and towards lunchtime.
That's right.
And especially those ones that have the little candies in them, and you walk over there and they've got their candy jar and it's nearly finished. And you go, oh, you don't have any candy left. I heard you guys had, the Pop-Tarts, or, there are conferences you go to, they got personalized Pop-Tarts. But, you go there and you go, oh, I heard you have the Coke bottles, And they'll go, oh, yeah, and they'll go and they'll hand some out, and they go, oh, where'd you hear that? And they'll go, oh, this guy was talking to you down, XYZ down on the other aisle, and then they'll start talking to you.
Oh,
You
yeah,
start
they're one of our biggest customers on the West Coast, is what they're going to say to you.
It's the best thing in the world. The end of the day, the lunchtime, the beginning, everybody is sort of, they'll talk, but they're sort of wanting to see who their prime targets are. So they're standing at that booth, they're really spry, and they're looking at your badge, going, oh, you're not somebody from XYZ company. I don't really want to talk to you. But by the end of the day,
they'll talk to anybody.
They want to talk to anybody because they just want to talk to somebody.
By the way, if you're going to be doing that, make sure you have a business card that just has your name, phone number, and an email on it. You don't want to give it to them and somebody says, that's a subsidiary of Procter & Gamble, don't you? And do you know Procter & Gamble's a competitor? Why the hell did you talk to this bozo? No. You have a blank business card. They don't know. They're looking for contacts. They're looking for follow-ups. By the way, you'll probably get stuff in the mail after the project for a year.
And now everybody's doing a digitized badge where they're like, oh, we have to scan you.
Yes.
So you always want to make sure that you do have your general email address. I'd say that anyways, even as a student, just have a general email address, because when you go to events, they want to scan your badge and they will send you junk mail. So
Tons of it.
Beginning now, you will want to have one of those. So when you do go to conferences, you can just do a general junk mail email address so that you just don't have everything coming to your nice, pristine email address with your job offers, because that would suck.
Yeah.
Because you might miss
And the thing is,
them.
by being able to watch there, then when you watch when everybody but one leaves for lunch, and one person is now talking to somebody else, and they've just put a stack of documents on the counter in front of the back room, that's the time you go over and say, hi, you didn't have these out when I was here before. Oh, okay, fine. I'll get one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just,
But
it's the specs for the new product line, that's all.
That's probably my favorite thing is trade shows and conferences. And
Yeah, but then you have to remember, you're walking around for 10 to 12 hours a day. And did you ever do Vegas?
CES.
Yes. Vegas is 2.5 million square feet. Okay? 2.5. And sometimes you have to walk over every one of them.
And sometimes you're lugging a bag.
Yes.
Because you get all those flyers and you go, I really don't need these. Let me scan it. That was my thing now. Let me scan it. But sometimes when you actually have the physical document and you go to someone else's booth and you have that in your hand, they will want to talk to you because there's an association of, oh, you might be affiliated with that organization, you might know something. So they'll want to talk to you if you actually have a physical document in your hand and you walk over to the Google counter and they see you've got some Apple folder in your hand, and they'll want to talk to you because they're like, well, maybe they know, maybe they're an expert, something.
Yeah.
But it's...
This is putting yourself in the place of your target. Every target is different. For whether it's elicitation interviews, whether it's running it on a hit and run on a trade show, whether it's over the phone or whatever, they're human beings. If you're lucky, they're under a lot of pressure, so they'll keep it short, but not so much pressure they won't talk to you. So you don't want to call on the Friday before a 3-day weekend when everyone's bailing out of there. No one's going to talk to you. Just keep your mind on that. They're working for a living too. You want to adapt to their schedule. Like getting information in the summer is very difficult because everybody's covering for everybody else. Yeah. Somebody who's covering for someone, if you're trying to get information, is probably of no interest to you. But you could try. They just may give you whatever they think that you need and not think about it. So remember, it's in the place of the target. You've got to be in the place of your client, whether it's internal or external. You've got to be in the place of the target. You've got to figure out, how does information move in that? If you take a number and think about it as a stream. The stream comes down and gets into a bigger stream with a lot more streams and everything else and finally ends up as the Mississippi River, okay? Where does the number or the fact that you need start to get into that stream? Is it way up here, in the research and development? Is it engineering? Is it product development over here? Is it the marketing department? Because if you can't disaggregate it down here, try to figure out what the source is and just go back up the stream until you find a source that you can get at least a part of it from. and you'd be surprised how easily it is to start getting the pieces that it's like you'll find, and she would smile as soon as I tell her, once you start getting the pieces, you know what the picture's going to look like. Yes. Right? See? That's right. In fact, there are friends back there too, and Craig will tell you the same thing. There's fun in the business sometimes.
It's fun all the time.
Except for the collecting the money.
Yeah, well, I think that doesn't really matter anyway.
Well, listen, we all get stiffed.
Exactly.
Okay.
At some point in your career, you will.
You will.
Yes, even if you do work for federal government, because, every once in a while there are strikes, remember.
Oh, God. I didn't
And they
think-
do have government shutdowns, so there you
Oh,
go.
yeah.
That happens. But I think Lindy's telling us that we're done.
We're done then.
Thank you both so much for this. I mean, hour flew by, and to see you light up talking about trade shows, I think there's something there. So
Oh,
be sure to
we
stop
have
by
our.
and talk
Those are our fun.
Those
happy
trade
places.
shows are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you
Oh,
both.
I
Appreciate
should
your
send
time.
her the tape I made for trade shows.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm going to have to see. I may have to scrub it.
Okay.
Well, we'll see.
But please, thank you very much to John. Please, thank you.
Suki. I appreciate it.
Please. Oh, come on.
You were easy on me. Thank you.
I know I was. Wasn't I?
Okay.
But
thank
now
you.
I know people will come over and ask him questions. So go ahead.
Oh, ask her question. She's nicer.
No.